If you think about it, it's obvious what it means. A concerted effort is a lot of people making an effort together in concert. But somehow that meaning has disappeared from people's consciousness, and more people talk about a concerted effort when they just mean a big effort. So somebody says, I'm going to make a concerted effort to stop smoking. And she doesn't mean she's got a multiple personality. It's just big effort. So that's changing. Happens a lot with vocabulary. Long words that don't get used a lot, that resemble each other, easily get mixed up. A pair of words that are getting mixed up at the moment is prevaricate and procrastinate. As you know, prevaricate means sort of telling lies, and procrastinate means putting things off. Don't do tomorrow what you can do the day after tomorrow. But people mix them up. Somebody will say, oh, she's always prevaricating. And they don't mean she's always lying. They mean she keeps putting things off. Very common kind of mistake. And in the end, perhaps prevaricate will mean procrastinate. Flout and flaunt are two similar words that people mix up. If I wave my arm around to show off my bracelet, somebody might say to me, stop flouting your jewellery. Well, I'm not flouting my jewellery, I'm flaunting my jewellery. What I'm flouting, perhaps, is a convention that men don't wear jewellery. Flouting is breaking a rule. Flaunting is showing something off. They're easily mixed up. I think for everybody, there are words out on the edge of their command of their own language, which they're not quite sure of, and they easily mix them up. And some of those mean that the language changes. The language actually changes, the whole language, because so many people are making the confusion. One good example of that is data. The word data came into English from Latin. In Latin, it's a plural, means things that are given, and it started out as a plural word in English meaning information. So people would say, you know, these data are interesting. Nowadays, it's turned into a singular for a lot of people, because plurals don't end in A normally in English. So people might say, this data is interesting. Other people get upset and accuse them of making a mistake, but it's becoming correct. I think this sort of thing bothers people because people like simplicity, they like clear lines, they like to say this is correct, this is not correct. Especially for teachers, we need to give simplifications when we're teaching, don't we? Grammar is often complicated, and if we try to tell students the whole truth about a point of grammar, then we'll fail, because the whole truth is too much to grasp at one time. When in life do you tell anybody the whole truth? I can see from your faces, you don't. Well, not in language teaching either. The problem is that we can forget that we're giving simplifications, and then we see something in the language that breaks this simple rule that we've got in our teaching books, and we think, what's happening here? Is that correct or not? Here's a letter I got. Lloyds Bank has opened a home loan account for you on the 15th of May. Well, we've all taught our students you don't use the present perfect with time adverbs like yesterday or last week or on the 15th of May. What we have to remember is that that is a simplification which is useful for teaching purposes because we don't usually do that. But the language has not read our little books of grammar rules. And English does sometimes do that. Not very often. Same with I'm loving it. Those structures, I'm loving, I'm remembering, I'm understanding, have been around in English for centuries. They're just not very common. So it's a good teaching rule, it's a good simplification to say, don't use them in progressive, continuous forms. But it's not the whole truth. So there's not something wrong there. The language isn't breaking the rules. But I must say, I'm loving it is very annoying. You know, I'm hating it. It's not only a problem for language teachers, it's a problem for native speakers. Native speakers like everything to be simple and clear, straight lines, and where you get variation in a language, they start arguing with each other, trying to prove that one is right and the other's wrong. So you get people, one person will say, she's very different to her sister, and the other will say, oh, no, it's not different to, it's different from. Don't you know that? Well, different to and different from have both been around in English for centuries. They're both normal. And if you're an American speaker, different than is also common. You can't say one is right and the other's wrong, but people like to do that. I've heard people arguing about the past tense of eat. Should you say ate or ate? Well, standard British English, people say both. I say ate, a lot of people say ate. All you can say is that they both happen. You can't say this is correct, that one's not correct. I've heard people arguing recently, should you say kilometre or kilometre? Well, who cares? We say both. Doesn't matter. People don't like language change and variation very much. And there's often a feeling that what's new is bad and what's spoken is bad. They get their rules from an older state of the language, what was traditionally written, and the written language people somehow feel is better, more polished than speech. So people would say, this is wrong. Well, they're not wrong, actually. John and Me Saw a Great Film Last Night is perfectly normal, standard, spoken English. It's wrong in writing. It's not what we write, but it comes up in speech very commonly. And the opposite, say, between you and I, is also common in speech. It's common in spoken English grammar. Shakespeare has an example of between you and I in The Merchant of Venice. Perhaps he hadn't read the right grammar books. People sometimes use logic to argue about these. They say, look, John and Me saw a great film last night. It's got to be wrong because John and Me is the subject, so it should be John and I because subjects have to be nominative. That is exactly like saying birds fly, therefore penguins should get up in the air. Most birds fly, most subjects are nominative, but in double subjects, we often have accusative pronouns. Nobody would say, Me saw a great film last night. John and Me saw a great film is perfectly normal in standard speech. It happens. If you'd have asked me, I'd have told you it's a common structure in spoken English. Don't ask me what the d and the v are. If you had have asked me, if you would have asked me, don't know. It's not either. It's if you'd have asked me. It's common. And actually, conditional structures in quite a lot of languages tend to change in speech so that one half has the same grammar as the other. Happens in German, happens in French, I'm told it happens in Spanish, and it certainly happens in English. The best question is not, is this right or is this wrong, but where is it right, where is it wrong? And these are examples of things which are right in casual speech, certainly not wrong, but wrong in writing, wrong in formal speech. It's a question of where, not if. It's interesting how native speakers get particularly nervy about the smallest things. Apostrophes are a good example. And people really are getting awfully worked up about apostrophes. This particular apostrophe is called the greengrocer's apostrophe. Reason is that in one of those markets in Britain where people write up the names of what they're selling on a blackboard in chalk, you keep seeing things like potatoes with O apostrophe S and tomatoes with apostrophe S and so on. In France, they actually think that apostrophe is very fashionable. It's very chic. So in a expensive Paris clothes shop, you're quite likely to see a sign, jeans with apostrophe S. They think that looks really good.